What's going on, guys? So today I want to talk to you about establishing your calorie deficit, why maintenance phases are important first, and just how to figure this all out, okay? So when I have a new client who comes on board, the first thing I always focus on is going into a maintenance phase for 2 weeks. The reason we start with the maintenance phase is there are a few reasons actually. Firstly, it gives your body basically stability, all right? Because most of you don't eat consistently the same amount of calories every day. Most of you don't eat regular meal routines in the same day. So what I mean by that is like some days you're having higher calories, some days you're having lower calories. Some days you're gonna be, not eating as enough. Some days you're gonna be eating too much. And then throughout the week, it's just kind of up and down. There's no real stability there. Some days you're not going to be eating until 10 a.m. Other days you're not going to be eating, you're eating first thing in the morning. And so we give your body a little bit of routine and regularity. This actually sets you up for a good foundation to then go into a deficit, all right? So giving your body regularity is key. Number two, like establishing an actual maintenance calorie intake. If you've been all over the place for the last few weeks, you could have a higher maintenance or a lower maintenance just because of your current food intake. So if we estimate if we guesstimate what your maintenance calories should be, and we have you eat into those calories for the first 2 weeks, again, not only is it giving your body stability, it's actually just giving us a guide to go from. Because if we're guesstimating your maintenance and we start there, if you're able to maintain your weight, well, then we know you're at your maintenance. If the weight's going down, then you're then you are under maintenance. If the weight's trending up, then you're in a surplus. So this just helps us understand where you need to have your starting point from. Otherwise, we're just randomly throwing darts in the air if we don't know where it's going to start coming from. If we're just going to pick a deficit out of thin air, we don't know if that's going to be a deficit. Is that going to be too big? Is it going to be too little? We don't know. So if instead we can focus on making sure that we give you a baseline to go from, we then are actually informed whether you are in a deficit or not, right? Thirdly, it also just helps us, I have a mind blank here, sorry. Thirdly, with the maintenance side of things too, it'll just help. Again, like I said, establish our baseline. I'm trying to recount my thoughts as I'm talking about this. It'll also help you make mistakes, is what I was trying to think of. Like making mistakes in a maintenance phase is way better than making mistakes in a dieting phase. Because you're gonna make mistakes in a dieting phase easier. But if we can iron out any of the creases at the very start before you go into a deficit, it's not gonna have any impact and it's not gonna draw out that deficit longer than it needs to be. So what I mean by this is, let's say you start a deficit and the first week you're a bit unprepared. So you have you have some high calorie days because you just didn't have meals prepared. Or you made a mistake and you were tracking incorrectly and you turned out you're a few hundred calories over or whatever it was. And then if you've done that for a week, that's a week ruined basically of your diet. And then you're like, oh fuck, this first week was just a waste. All right, I'm gonna go again next week. And then maybe you make some more mistakes. Again, maybe there was some more tracking errors, or maybe you're still just trying to find your feet. And instead of wasting time doing that while in a deficit, which just makes it tough, do it for the first 2 weeks of maintenance. Because if you make mistakes in maintenance, there's no issue, Your body's more forgiving in maintenance. You have a little bit more wiggle room. You have time to make mistakes without it being an issue. And that's a good thing. Because if you make mistakes then and you learn and basically it's a training wheels for those first 2 weeks, then when it comes to a deficit phase, you're gonna be ready to rock and roll. You've made those little mistakes that are avoidable now. You know what you need to do and it's gonna help set you up for success. So that's why I think maintenance phases are a great starting point, okay? So once you've done your maintenance phase for 2 weeks, then you wanna create a calorie deficit. Now, the amount of calories we're going to create for a deficit is going to be based upon your body weight and percentage of body weight, right? So ideally, any good rate of weight loss is going to be between 0.3% to 1% a week. And that's quite a big range, but it's good because you have a range. It's not a specific amount. So when we think about a range of percentage, the reason for this is we have the lower end, which is slower, which is okay. It just means you get more food, you won't be as food focused, you'll have more energy. It just means the deficit will be longer overall. You have a more aggressive, which goes more to that 1%, which obviously weight loss will be faster, but you have a higher chance of falling off track. You have a lower chance of adherence. You have a higher chance of losing muscle mass if you're not getting enough, and you just have a higher chance of being fucking miserable because it's harder, all right? So that's why we have a range. Now, in order to figure that out, once you establish your maintenance calories, and you're like, okay, well, how many calories fewer do I need to eat? We know roughly that if you eat 500 calories in a deficit a day, you are going to lose 1 pound a week, which is about 450 grams. So if we do some maths and we just divide that, basically what that comes down to is for every 100 calories you're in a deficit per day, you are going to lose about 90 grams on the scale in a week. All right. So if you're in a 500 calorie deficit a day, you're going to lose about 450 grams. If you're in a 400 calorie deficit per day, you're going to lose about 360 grams. If you're in a 300 calorie deficit per day, you're going to lose about 270 grams. Okay. Now, like even when I said per 100 calories is 90 grams, if you create a 100 or 200 calorie deficit, you may not actually notice that deficit for a while, just because it's so small. And this is why we start roughly at that 300 calorie deficit, okay? So it's about 270 grams lost a week. And then also if we look at that 300 calorie deficit, give or take, for most people, if we look at 300 grams, that's gonna be like 0.5% of your body weight as a 60 kilo person. So you can that's like a perfect amount for a 60 kilo person. And then as we go up, right? So again, if you're 60 kilos, you can lose basically between, it's like 250 grams all the way up to 600 grams per week. That's your max, 600 grams a week as a 60 kilo person. And you're like, oh, but I want to lose a kilo a week. Well, fuck, go for it. But guess what? It's not going to benefit you at all. And it's going to increase your chance of, you will have a chance of losing muscle mass if you go by that 1%. So it's actually good because we just base this on your body weight, and this keeps you in a good range and also protects you. It's not going to fucking, throw you off or put you in, risk any potential issues, because we're basing it basically personally on you, all right? So there, you got your maintenance calories, you calculate your deficit. And again, we've got that good range there. So for me, I'm 90 kilos, about 92 kilos at the moment. So if I calculate a deficit, I can go all the way from 270 grams, which is again, that 300 calorie deficit, all the way up to 900 grams, which is going to be about 1,000 calorie deficit a day. So I've got those wiggle rooms there. I've got, basically what I want to choose. And also I've got a range. Like I could say, okay, I want to lose between 0.3% to 0.6%. So my deficit is going to be, what would that be? 450, 500. So it'd be like a 600 calorie deficit all the way to a 300 calorie deficit. So I can set my target between that range, and some days I might get more of a deficit, some days I might get less of a deficit. And that actually makes it quite flexible for you to be able to stay in a deficit and not feel like you have to be so rigid with losing a certain amount of weight. Because again, some people, they're like, I want to get it done, I want to get it out of the way. And if you want to be more aggressive, you can be more aggressive. That's no issues with that. Like, if that's what you want to do, then go for it. But just remember, there are trade-offs, okay? And the more aggressive it goes, like you are with your deficit, the harder it could be to stay on track. I know for me, aggressive deficits just don't work. I've tried to convince myself in the past that it does, but it doesn't. That's a learning lesson, We all learn from our mistakes at the end of the day, and I made a mistake, and multiple times, convincing myself that I can, and I just don't. So it's up to you. So I guess that's that's really what you guys need to understand, right? So establish a baseline with maintenance first, because it is important. Do not skip this step, because it'll make your dieting phase harder, because you'll make more mistakes in your dieting phase, and because you're just not giving your body that initial baseline to go off to actually know what your deficit is going to be. If you pick a random fucking deficit, you don't know if that's going to be fast or slow. You don't even know if it's going to be a deficit. And it's like, do you want to spin your wheels for 2 weeks because you were impatient, or do you actually want to slow it down, right? Take the time to create a baseline, then create a deficit from there. And then you've got your deficit options, right? So you know that every 100 calories, starting from about 300, you're going to be able to lose about 270 grams a week with 300 calories, 360 grams a week with 400, 450 grams with 500. I'm trying to do the math real quick. 540 grams with 600 calories, and basically it's like your 9 timetables, So that's what you guys need to do. Hope that helps. Hope it gives you a bit of information about what you need to be doing to create your calorie deficit. Again, don't fucking cheat the maintenance. Just do the maintenance phase. It'll help, right? So I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, as always, hit me up on Instagram at tysonthetrainerr with 2 R's. And if you found this helpful, make sure to share. And I would love if you could give a rating on Instagram, a rating on Spotify or Apple, because this way it helps me reach more people. Cool? All right, speak to you guys next time.